welcome to the Monopath podcast. I'm speaking with Eddie Kaboom today, who is one half of Kaboom Images. So he's a photographer, the first of hopefully many photographers who will grace me with their presence on the podcast. It was great to catch up with Eddie. He's another podcast guest who I've known for many years, but like many of the other guests, if not all of them, this is the first time I have had the opportunity to really peer into the phenomenology of their mind to see how they tick and how they think about the creative stuff that they produce. Photography is a bit of a weird one, I think, for a podcast to talk about it, so you may want to refer to Eddie's work on Instagram. I give the links at the end of the show for that, but Kaboom Images should deliver you to wherever you need to be to see some of the works. This was one of the first times I've done a podcast late on in the evening. I mean, to me, late on is about 7:30, but I struggle sometimes with kind of knowing when I'm best able to think. For example, I have a seemingly natural dip in the afternoon, around about 3 p.m, where I simply cannot focus on really anything at all. So that's a time of day where I can't read anything heavy duty. I can't really discuss anything that I've got to think about in any detail. I can't do any of my philosophy work. I tend to resign myself to either eating or something that doesn't require so much of me, which usually means that I do my podcasts somewhere prior to that. Shifts in the culture have kind of forced me to change that up a little bit. So some of the podcasts I'm recording in the evening now, and I seem to be coping okay with that. But I guess I would be grateful if you could point out any difference that you observe. I listen to these back. I edit these all myself, so I have to. I haven't noticed any change, really, but it's quite possible that there's one there. You can let me know. I'm happy for the feedback. Speaking of which, if you are enjoying the show, then leave us a review on iTunes. Preferably a positive one. That just means that the algorithms that underlie iTunes have helped to boost and promote the podcast. It's a little helpful. You can also subscribe to YouTube, but I still default to the same suggestion I usually do, which is if you do want to support what I'm doing, buy some tea from Arthur Duff Tea Co. That's one of the things that I do, and that really helps, and you get some free tea in some kind of roundabout way. This is probably the opportunity for me to share with you anything I'm doing as Arthur Dove as well. So other than the podcast, which is now a little bit more sporadic, to cleave the way for other things that I like to do. In this case, I've gone back into the recording studio with Ronnie Spakowski, who produced Little Picture and Lull and Hound on the Hunt. That was about 4 years ago, I think, that I did those. And so we're back. We're working on a small EP, an extended play, so probably like 25 minutes of music, about 5 songs. By the time this podcast has aired, we'll be about 3 sessions, maybe 5 deep. So that's quite exciting. I haven't released anything new for a number of years, so really quite excited to finally share some of the things I've been doing, and hopefully I can maintain the pace that I lost. We'll see. Anyway, without further ado, I bring you today's guest. Here's Eddie Kaboom. Well, Eddie, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Darren. Nice to be here.
Yes, it is very nice, actually, as well. We bump into each other from time to time, but this is a little more formal than we'd usually have. But it's a delight. You are probably I think you're the first photographer that I've been able to speak to on the podcast. So it's quite nice. Oh,
brilliant.
Yeah, I'm quite blessed with actually a lot of photographers that I could have spoken to. And before I did the podcast, I was doing lives on my T page, and I spoke to James Jamal Akbar, who is a photographer I've worked with before, who's done some of my photos for Arthur Dove. But you did some of my photos many moons ago for.
Oh God, yeah, probably about 6-7 years ago.
Yeah, I think you did 2 sets for me. You've done ones that were just me.
Yeah.
That was when I was making records and I was at the studio, the recording studio, and you did some for that. And you've done some since when I was in my last band, which we called Think Tank. You did the promo shoots for that. We did it at Scarborough, didn't we?
Yeah, nice day out in Scarborough that afternoon, actually. And I know it wasn't directly for you, but did some for Liam when you were producing for him as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so Liam's been on the podcast too. He was on the first
Oh,
podcast.
fantastic.
Woes and Wonder now is his current project. He's doing sort of synchronization style music. It's really like pretty jangly music. Great stuff.
I mean, he popped up a few weeks ago, and I've been keeping my eye on him since then.
Yeah, he's super talented, Liam. So I've got a lot of time. I've got a lot of time for talent in general, which is why you're here.
You flatter me. You flatter me. We've not even got started.
I know. I embarrass myself. I make this joke at some point throughout practically every single podcast I do that I'm not going to embarrass myself or fawn over the guests too much. But the reason that I invite people on the podcast is because I do already find them interesting and I think they're gifted in some way that I'm not, and I want to know more about it. So I'm just trying to be honest about it. I don't know if everybody feels comfortable with that degree of honesty. I'm really not trying to ingratiate myself to you. I just genuinely do think that. So,
well, I think we've known each other long enough to be able to talk like that anyway, haven't we? So
yeah, that's it. I mean, it's kind of a personal policy for me to just be who I am, not really hide it too much. Just if I think something, then I'm quite comfortable saying it. Which brings us to the content of the podcast. So let's start with framing. One thing I was really interested to speak to a photographer about is how you might look at the world, or the natural world in particular, different to the average person without a camera. Do you find yourself doing that? Do you look at things differently to you might have done were you not a photographer?
I think so, yeah. I would definitely say that. I mean, lighting, it's always my thing. I'm constantly looking at how light's hitting buildings, people, shapes. Like the Hepworth, for instance, fantastic building. But the way it changes colour with the light, that tends to be my, obviously, photography comes from painting with light. So it's your main part of photography. So it is interesting to just see how light lands. And I'm always looking at colours of light.
I've never heard that phrase before about photography, the painting with light. Is that a common one?
Photo, light, Greek, painting.
I mean,
so
I guess that kind of does make sense. I just never put 2 and 2 together there, I guess, but that's quite pretty, actually.
Nice, isn't it?
Yeah. Is that how does that really like inform how you're doing the work of photography then? Does noticing the light pattern come first?
I think more so since I've moved more into the landscaping. Obviously, before a lot more of it was studio based, so you had complete control over lighting scenarios with it, and you could set the lighting up as you wanted. When you're doing landscaping, obviously you don't have that luxury, so it is what Mother Nature throws at you on any given day, any given moment. Especially if you're out somewhere such as Scotland, where me and my business partner went there last year. It can change within seconds. 1 minute thick with rain, next minute you've got a beam of light hitting a mountain that lasts for a couple of seconds, and then it's gone back to the rain. Or so you're more at the mercy. Well, you are at the mercy of the elements, not more. You're completely at the mercy of the elements.
Yeah. There's a role of luck then, isn't there? I suppose in creativity for you.
Or without a shadow of a doubt, with regard to landscaping, there is, yeah. I think our sort of mantra is just make the best of the situation that's thrown at you. I must admit, I like moody grey skies. I like lack of colour in stuff. So it works for me in most weather. It's when I've got a clear sky and that all sunny, does nothing for me.
Yeah. Is it Chris the opposite to that? Chris being your business partner?
He's more into his colour, I think, definitely. I mean, I've looked back at my work over the years and found a lot of it is, I'm not saying all of it, but some of it you do have doubt, and I don't know particularly what makes me do it. It's not often I use black and white. It's just the natural colours that are there at the time. But give me a cold winter day, even a rainy winter day, than a warm sunny summer day for sunrise, sunsets, whatever. I like that grey, bleak look.
Do you think that's got something to do with your priority for light and shadow rather than colour?
Quite possibly, but you do find obviously when you've got a lot of cloud, it's a flatter light. I just find there to be more drama. There can be more drama in the sky when it's darker and more overcast. Some people would disagree with you. Obviously, it's just my personal tastes.
So what is it that kind of instills that sense of drama in you? What are you seeing?
Oh, that's a really difficult one. I didn't anticipate that one.
They're all going to be like that. So sorry.
No, don't worry. I don't know. The weather, I suppose, like if I'm doing portraits, I do like to use shadow, like one lighting scenarios some of the time. So you do get really heavy shadows on people, hiding certain bits of them, hiding parts of them, just little bits of them exposed.
I mean, it might be helpful to think about a piece of work that either you are fond of or something that you've created, a photograph that you've managed to capture that you think really hits the nail on the head for your personal taste.
I think my personal one, and it's years old, and it's a self-portrait, and I'm not into doing self-portraits particularly. There's much more interesting people to look at than me. That's why I picked the camera up in the first place. But I know you've seen it. It was my Facebook, might still be my Facebook. I haven't used it in years. My Facebook with on a couch with a cup and a sort of see-through version of myself resting on the arm, like a double exposure.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, I suppose that one to me, that one, I was going through a bad phase with depression at that point, and I was trying to visualize it and make people be able to visualize what it felt to me, if that makes sense.
It does.
And even making that picture, I found it quite a cleansing experience because it gave me something to look at and go, yeah, that's what this feeling is about. Visualizing that feeling. Some people use, the black dog or dark cloud over them or whatever, but that one just helped me. It gave me a full physical picture of what I was feeling.
Yeah, maybe there's. I'll do my best to share that image on the podcast in some way when I'm publishing this. But I'm going from memory here. But as I recall, the little gremlin version of you on the edge of this sofa, on the arm of the sofa, is almost. It looks quite busy and messy and chaotic.
Yeah, that's the one.
Whereas you yourself are looking fairly somber, sitting on the sofa, quite far away, opposite ends of a two-seater sofa. Am I getting that right?
I think the Mimi is sat in the middle of the sofa, and the like I said, that one would be the figure on the right would be sort of a representation of my depression. But yeah, it's sort of see-through, hair's messed up. I don't think it's naked. Obviously, you can't see anything. It's implied nudity in it. Yeah, that's the one that is the one you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, particularly creative as that one. I've seen a lot of your work, and much of it is beautiful and artistic, you would say, and it's kind of photographs of the landscape or even portraiture. But that one seems to be in its own space, separate from everything else.
There's a couple I did. I think I've only put two out there from what I would call a series. It's not exactly a series, but around that time when I was feeling how I was feeling, I think I don't often do photographs of me. Generally, if I do photographs of myself, it's messing about, testing things out for future photos. But that one, it was very, very personal, and I felt like I needed to do it for me.
Yeah, almost like an impulse
Yeah.
to do it. I think that's how a lot of people describe the art that they produce in some way or another. I know I do.
Yeah.
I feel about music very similarly. I think it's often something that just kind of sits there on the arm of the sofa, really, for me as well. And it's. I mean, I know for you that image embodied depression, but for me, it's almost as if there's a lot of different things, spectres, kind of looming in the background for me.
Even though it's my own photo, it's my photograph, I don't feel it's not. There's not one specific meaning behind it. That's just the meaning that I took from it. So if you see other things within that image, then they're yours to take. There's no right or wrong with it from that perspective.
Yeah, I think of the image itself, I didn't really ever give it any thought. I don't know why that is. Usually I think with art, I'm very different to how I am with anything else in the natural world. I would look at, say, human behavior or some in terms of like psychology, and I would want to study it and break it apart into, disaggregate this whole complex mess of things, the tangle of wires, and see what each one is doing, where each one leads to. But I don't do that with art. I seem to just be quite content to just take it as a whole.
Yeah, and I suppose the thing is, you are familiar with my work, and I suppose a lot of it, there's no narrative to it. It is what it is. It's a photograph of a person, of a landscape, of a car. It's capturing that moment, and it doesn't have the narrative, whereas that one does. So, like you say, it does to me, and possibly to you, as you said, it kind of sticks out a bit in my body of work because it's different to the other things that I've done in the past.
Yeah, I think if it's got that personal meaning as well, that does have an effect. I mean, I feel like that's something you can see almost.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a bias, I think, in Western culture to want to analyze and put things into words and explain the art. I mean, that's what's motivated me to do this podcast in the first place, and that is the interesting factor for me with art. But I don't usually do it. It's not in my nature to look at a photograph like that and kind of think about what it means and kind of take it apart and say, I bet this is what inspired it. This is what that person was thinking while they did it. And this is what it is supposed to represent. And this is what it could represent. I don't really do that. I don't necessarily know if it's a good thing to do it. I mean, I guess all I'm really pointing to there is that you've got two options when you're presented with something novel like a piece of art. You can either try and disassemble this whole thing and talk about the psychology of it and the meaning of it and the semantics of it or whatever you like, or you can just take it as this whole complex of things.
I think in many respects, modern day has leads to that in the fact that, I mean, I think it's great that so many people have access to cameras. Not really everybody has access to a camera, but does it dilute your, do things get lost because you're constantly bombarded with images? You go on Instagram, you're flicking through, and you see hundreds of pictures over the space of a minute. How much do you take it in? I don't mean specifically with with regards to my image. I just mean, overall with photography in sort of the day and age that we're in.
Yeah, I was gonna get to Instagram and people being trigger happy. Everyone seems to think they're a photographer these days, myself included. But let's kind of, if we could shelve that for now and come back to it later, we'll just put a flag in it for later. I just want to kind of hone in on what we're getting at there. So using the art for mental well-being, I suppose, and you're not alone in that by any means. I think this is becoming another trend on the podcast, is that a lot of people who maybe they're more creative than others. It's hard to say, but there's a type of person who uses what we would call creativity or like artistic behavior, like an artistic practice, as a means of kind of almost unraveling themselves, discovering themselves maybe, or finding themselves, or trying to figure themselves out. Is that how you've used it?
Yeah, initially no, but then over the past, when I say initially, I've been taking photographs since I was 16, so maybe over the past 15 years. I'm 38 now, so the past sort of 15 years, I've definitely been using it more in that respect. At first, it was my reason for getting into photography was all my mates were in bands. I'm not I mean, I love music. I've just never been able to play instruments. One of the big regrets from being a child not taking an instrument up. But that was a friend. Well, it was actually Ad's band. One of our friends that asked me to.
Yeah, it was on the last podcast. So.
Well, yeah. Well, he asked me to do some photographs for one of his bands back in 98, 99, something ridiculous like that. And I just said, yeah, why not? And I got into it and I fell in love with it from there. And then, like, without meaning it's kind of cliche, rather than picking up guitar, the camera became sort of my instrument. And
And you just kind of stuck. Does it feel like it is your instrument in that case?
it does. I mean, like I've spent a lot of like 2016, 2017, just going off on breaks, like city breaks to Europe, and my camera came with me. And it's like whenever I get it out, it's a constant companion, as weird as that sounds. And when I bought a new camera, I was gutted at my old camera. I was letting my old camera down that had been my traveling buddy that was replaced. If it was a better camera, it was like, am I going to have the love for this camera? Have the last one? It's a strange. Yeah, I do have a relationship, with my camera, which is weird when you're saying that about a machine. But
No, I wonder if it's this. I mean, people name their cars, don't they? And they name their guitars or instruments or anything like that. I don't have that sort of giving them a pronoun. Sorry, no, a proper noun. I don't give any of my instruments proper nouns. They don't have anything like that. But I do have a. They do have a significance. My instruments are something. At least my two bass guitars are something I will not part with.
yeah, I think I went through a period just because I couldn't decide what to buy. I went through a period without a camera, and I felt like I'd lost an arm. Um, and it was strange, and I don't think I want to be in that position again.
Yeah, I mean, is it something like how I would feel? How I'm imagining that would feel is how I feel when I don't have an instrument. Like I still keep having the same frequency of ideas. I'm still feeling musical, if you like. But if I'm
Mm.
not around somewhere that has a guitar or a piano or anything, I almost feel I almost feel like I'm stuck at a brick wall with a brick wall in front of me. I feel stifled. It's like it's stultifying for me being.
Yeah, no, it does feel that very much that way. Especially over lockdown. I mean, fortunately, I use a camera as part of work, so I've kind of got a small fix with that. But been locked down, been unable to get out, go exploring with my camera. Like obviously, like I said too early on, I'm not the only one who's had any issues with lockdown. But so please don't think I'm saying it in that respect. But yeah, my issue is like not being able to get out and explore and take my camera with me and go sightseeing. My camera gives me a push to do things.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps it's worth just explaining to people who are listening on the podcast who may not be as familiar with your work as I am. What what's the range of things that you do with Kaboom Images?
Well, I suppose you could start at the one end. We do product photography. I suppose we special, and we'd go. The Kaboom Images thing isn't so much the landscape; it's just we are best mates and we hang out all the time and we go and do photographs and stuff. So the landscapes, then we do portraits, like doing pin-up, with like vintage, we like cars. We know a lot of people with a lot of interesting cars. We know a lot of interesting models, so we can combine the two and do good, really interesting shoots with cars, with models, with locations.
Yeah, you've I suppose other than that, would you really count the you talked about it as a series, the really creative, the depression piece. Would you count that as something you do with Kaboom Images, or is that just kind of in a pocket of
That
yours?
was in a pocket. I mean, not that we don't do creative things, but that particular part that was before the inception of Kaboom Images.
That was almost just. I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but a cleansing experience, perhaps.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, that couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah. Actually, speaking of that, then, just to return to it, just maybe one more time. When that idea came to you, did you know what it was you were doing? Did you know what it meant, or did that kind of fall into place somewhere along the line?
I think two strands within my brain, and they sort of collided, but they were independent of each other at the time. I was laying in bed one night, trying to get to sleep, and the idea of the image came into my head. Like I thought, I need to, and for myself, for my own well-being, I need to be able to picture this and understand what I'm feeling. And then this picture sort of drove in the night I was in bed, and then I shot it the next morning. I thought, right, I need to, strike while the iron's hot, while this idea is fresh in my head. Get straight in and do it, and it came out better than I anticipated it at the time. I mean, film photography's moved on. That was what, 2008, I think. So we are going back a long way.
Yeah, yeah.
But at the time, it was good. And whenever I posted it, it always, it got a lot of interest.
Was it quite smooth then, that working process from idea landing in your head to being a finished product?
That one did, yeah. And I don't know if it was just the interest that I had within that image. Not that I don't have interest in other images, but I think it was just that I could see it. I could see it without any doubt. So a lot of the time, it's like, right, I can see this, and I've got to work. I've got to work around it.
Yeah.
And that one, it probably shot it, like, got up and did it within about 20 minutes, and after that, we're changing my hairstyle and derobing, so to speak.
Do you find the same thing then? We opened the podcast with framing. I don't know if that's the technical term that you use when you're doing photography, but I'm kind of thinking about what you see through the camera lens, I guess. What's in the frame? That's what I'm asking. When you're in any of these other environments, say it's with the pinups or with cars or with the natural landscape, do you have a clear idea of, or an expectation of what you want to see or what you would hope to see, like an ideal?
With the landscapes, obviously, you go in places and you're seeing what's there. You're exploring the angles, looking at your best, the best angles, and doing your research beforehand. For instance, Nice Point. We went to Nice Point on the Isle of Skye, which is a huge rock that sticks out into the sea, with a little lighthouse on the end of it. And we'd been dying to go there for absolutely ages. It was one that we'd been to Skye twice, and it was the first time we wanted to go, and we missed out. The second time we were going, I just looked into it before and came across a photographer called Mads Peter Iverson, who's a fantastic landscape photographer, really interesting bloke. Don't know him personally; it's through YouTube and Instagram. And he just mentioned a lot of people shoot from up the top where you park your car. He said if you get down, there's a plinth you can sort of stand on, and you manage to break the sky with the point of this rock, and it just takes the photograph to an entirely different level. So it's learning where you are, and that with the pin-up thing, it's different because you can work with people. You can get them to move around. You move around the people. You can alter light, etc. So you've got less rush, and it's more, I suppose, to a degree, more experimentation within that in some respects. But if you've got, we do have ideas in your head, and you just go straight for them.
Yeah, is it a question of just balancing a different? There's like different properties that you've got to balance, and so on a landscape shoot, one of the things that you don't really have to think about to some degree is lighting, because you can't control it.
Well, I mean, if you go back to earlier on when you said we shot your band, if you remember, we were fighting against the tide. We're out on the rocks. Yeah. We were fighting. We had X amount of time, about 40, 50 minutes to get these photographs in, and the tide was creeping in all the time. So, sometimes the elements are against you as you're in a studio. The only thing that's really against you is time, and generally, you and the model, or you and the people you're working with, said, right, well, I'm here all evening, so we sort of shoot until we get it, or we lose interest, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I suppose I'm just asking you about what are the different elements that are of control in a photo shoot. I suppose, like in one of your pinup shoots, you can control the lighting, you can control probably a series of other things. I mean, I'm not really sure. I guess that's what.
There's lighting, there's angles for using cars, and we can say to the owner, can we just move it this way? Can we move it that way? Move around the car, move the lighting around the car. It's relatively straightforward.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Compared that to a landscape, and all you can really do is move.
Yeah. I mean, in many respects, it's easy to do because there's just you rushing, but at the same time, you've not got that control. So if you're in the wrong position, then the sun, disappearing over the horizon and getting the beautiful colours in the sky, they last for minutes. I mean, I was in where was I? Venice one morning, murky grey morning, and then out of the blue, or out of the grey, I should say, just this ball of red sunlight just appeared from out of this grey, really bright red, and it lasted for a couple of seconds. Managed to catch it on my phone, but my camera didn't catch it. I just missed it. And I don't know, that's done a long exposure, wash the colour out. It's frustrating, especially when you look at your phone and think, I've got it on that, but I've not got it on the quality I want it type thing.
Yeah. I wonder if the technology will move on at some point so it's integrated into you somehow. You can totally imagine that. Get a bit sci-fi.
Can't put anything past it at the minute, can you?
Yeah, I do think about these things. You could totally imagine it though. Photographer, a high spec camera that's literally just built into your eyes.
And there's no more powerful camera than your eye.
I was speaking to, I mean, I forget who I had this conversation with because it was ages ago, but this is this is one of the thought trails that I went off on at one point, and I was thinking about what would it look like if we had email integrated, because I think that's the way the world's moving at some point. A lot of more things will gradually be integrated in some way or another. And I've heard Elon Musk talking about kind of drilling into the skull and implanting chips, like little microchips that can boost your cognition so you can, I don't know, think faster. I'm not really sure on the specifics, but you could totally imagine, like, what would it look like if you could do emails without having to write anything? Because that seems like that's where we're getting close to, simply being able to think and write the email and send it. I mean, I don't know if this is making any sense, but
Well, I mean, look at again, correct me if I'm wrong, but like Stephen Hawking, he literally controlled his computer with the muscles inside his cheek, didn't he?
it did it.
Apparently, yeah, apparently. If I've got that wrong, then please forgive me. But
Well, I don't know. Like, it's just 10 years in the future. You can imagine things being very different. I mean, predictions like that always seem to be wrong. But at some point in the future, you can imagine a world where emails are not typed out and we find phones and gadgets a bit cumbersome and slow, and it's just integrated. And so my sending an email to you doesn't involve a keyboard, it doesn't involve a phone or any of this sort of things. It simply involves me thinking about it and making some kind of internal command to send it. But I mean, to me, isn't the analog for that telepathy? Isn't that what that is?
that's a very interesting point. Not. I suppose you're passing information through thought, so it would be, wouldn't it?
What would be the what would be the difference in your psychology there, like in your personal experience between sending an email without typing it and just thinking it, and communicating to somebody through like telepathy? I don't see there being any huge difference between the two.
Other than it being a technological thing rather than a biological thing, I don't think you'd.
Isn't it mad?
I don't see the difference.
And if we could do things like that, I mean, it seems obvious to me that somehow affixing a high spec camera to the even higher spec camera of your eyeball wouldn't be too difficult to imagine.
They kind of did that episode of Black Mirror regarding that, didn't they?
Oh, did they? I've probably seen it and stolen the idea then.
No, it wasn't so much attaching a camera, but they could use. You could basically run back what you'd seen. You could run back your memory. So a couple would be
Yeah.
arguing. So you
I know
said
what you
this, you
mean.
said that. No, I didn't. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's on the cards. I mean, with living through a lockdown as well in the midst of a pandemic, it makes you wonder what things are changing, because money is one of those things that they've been speculating is on its way out for some number of years. And there's conspiracy theorists who think that's a bad thing, and there's others who don't.
I was just going to mention that myself. Like, yeah, this cashless environment we're coming in, that we seem to be moving into, and your phone being now your bank card. No necessity for cash. I can't remember the last time. Other like this week, I think I bought some dinner with money, but it's the first time I've used physical cash since March.
Yeah, I can't really recall the last time I've used it. I actually find it quite burdensome anyway, having to carry a wallet with coins and notes. I hardly ever do it because it's just a pain. So I am quick to convenience, and possibly to my own detriment in the future, who knows. But I just prefer the convenience of it all being in one place. And I think the logical conclusion of that, if you keep reiterating that with technical evolutions, at some point you don't have the phone. It's embedded in you somewhere.
Well, I get that there was that. I saw a gentleman on TV, and he was into his body mods, and I think he'd done an underskin implant of his Oyster card chip. So he put his Oystercard chip on, and then he got another. I can't remember what the other chip was under one hand, so he'd just literally walk and flash his hand over the barriers, and he could go through. No Oystercard, just a chip in his hand.
Very convenient, but I'm not sure I'm there yet.
No, I think it'll take a lot for me to wish to be there.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll be in our generation or not, but I just think at some point, if if things continue to go the same way, that'll be inevitable. I suppose this is the limits of human thinking sometimes, because it's very easy for a person to do what I've just done and kind of go from from writing letters and paying with cash to having a phone to having your card on there to having it in your skin. That's very easy to do, that kind of linear thread from point A to point Z. Nice and easy.
And logical.
Yeah, nice.
In it's a logical progression.
Yeah, it is. It's exactly that. It's exactly that. It's a logical pattern. You're just moving from one cause to an effect and then repeating that process on and on. What's not so easy to do is to consider the things that you can't expect and what they might do, and the effect of living in a world where it has these conversations about whether we should or shouldn't. Which is why in things like the predictions made by things like, I don't know, Star Trek, any sci-fi TV show made in the 70s or the 80s, that's why they often get it right in some ways that are quite obvious, doors that open themselves being a good example, and wrong in others where they can't imagine. What is it? Is it Space Odyssey, 2001 Space Odyssey, where they still had computers that they had to type on and joysticks and things like that? And it's like all of these other crazy developments with an artificial intelligence who can lip read, but they still have to type physically with their fingers and things like that. And so they kind of missed they couldn't imagine the iPad, the revolution of like touch screens and things like that.
Well, I mean, you look at it in Back to the Future 2, when they first go to 2015, and the sort of like there's the iPad there. Somebody's using an iPad, or a tablet type device, not necessarily iPad. There's like that holographic shark, hologram. And then you look at Coachella where they had the holographic game.
Oh, a 2-pack, yeah.
So yeah, like there's quite a few things within that. And that was, what was that, 1980? The first one was 85, wasn't it? But was the second one 88?
It was something. It was something like that. I know the first one was 85 because that's the year I was born, but I'm not sure about the second one or the third, for that matter.
Chris will kill me for not getting that right.
All right. I guess the interesting part for me there, at least in the context of what I'm trying to do with this podcast, is like, what is the creative process like? And you can see two ways of thinking about things there. One of them is this kind of longitudinal thread. Is that the north-south line? I always forget with my maps. And latitudinal being the east-west.
East-west, yeah.
Right, so the longitudinal arrow kind of being this logical thought, this progression from cause to effect that just you can kind of make some logic sense of it. We do that really easily when we're thinking about science, in air quotes. When we do something artistic instead, it's when we're doing something quite the opposite, and it's when we're making those lateral moves, like to the side instead. There's latitudinal moves, left or right. And I mean, I kind of think that's the point of art, really, is to make those sideways move. At least with good art, it's doing something that's sideways, that's unpredicted by anybody else.
Yeah.
Do you think of bad art, to me, art that I don't really have the same sort of regard for, is when it starts with, I mean, let's say in something like musical terms, where it starts with a genre of music that's very popular, and then there's a kind of reinterpretation of it a few years later, say another artist doing something quite similar, but a little bit different. And then years later, another artist who's doing that a little bit different, and it just progresses that way. I kind of, once you get to the 5th generation of that, which might take a couple of years or whatever, it's quite boring at that point. I've kind of switched off and I don't find it interesting anymore. What I find interesting is when there's a dominant genre in a culture, and there's some kind of sideways move, and all of a sudden there's this other thing that nobody could have predicted and caught, and it just goes off out of nowhere. You might have something spring into mind there of an example.
I mean, I suppose you could sort of you look at grunge, for instance, going back to, and I don't particularly like using that term, but you had, the sort of Seattle bands and that original energy that came out of Seattle, and then further down the line, you've got bands almost trying to emulate it originally, like Nickelback and Puddle of Mud and all that, which don't scratch the surface and don't have that energy or point or purpose to them.
Yeah, it was kind of like grunge diluted.
Yeah. Diet grunge.
Diet grunge, that's better. Yeah. I actually thought it with what struck me was bands who, I don't know if they're still called gent or like math bands, anything like.
Sorry, you broke up there.
So bands who are considered to be like gent, like DJENT, that's the sound. They're all very fiddly, very technical, but that seemed to just appear out of nowhere all of a sudden. I think at the time that came out, I mean, let's say that was maybe early 2000s when Periphery were one band who grew quite large. I mean, they're the ones that first kind of got me. Them or Sixth were two bands who were doing this kind of like mathy, jazzy, experimental, manic rock out of nowhere.
I think that was quite an exciting time all around that time, because you've got, like you said, the more mathy side of it, but then there was like the screamo, if you want to use it, that particular genre. There was a lot of hardcore bands, like new wave of American heavy metal sort of came out as well, and there was a lot of energy there. I suppose, some of it might have been taken from early hardcore, but there seemed to be an energy and a movement with it. It seemed to grab a lot of people.
Yeah, I wonder if I'm just talking about innovation, and I just like that. That's what I kind of gravitate to, like the innovators, the ones who do something completely novel that you couldn't have predicted. Like, I think that to me is usually that's something respect worthy for me. I think now I actually think about it, like all of or at least the large majority of bands that I would describe myself as like a fan of, which is not many, are all bands or artists who've done something that's quite innovative. One of my favorite bands is Finch, and most people love Finch for their first record, What It Is to Burn, and it's a great record. It's like that screamer genre that you just mentioned. But for me, everything that they did after that, the album directly after that, Sail Out to Sunshine, it's a masterpiece.
Oh, so that's quite a tangent from the first album, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just, I really loved the first album when I was there, when that was like in the present. But as I've grown up, I mean, when the second album was released, I loved it and was surprised at all of the negative reviews to it, which there were quite many, who just thought it was average and didn't really get it. But there was something about that record that I was just like, this is just flawless. It's just absolutely perfect. And it's like 15 tracks long, but I was like, it's pure genius. It's so unlike anything else, but it's still alike enough in some way that I'm not repulsed by it. Like, that's genius to me.
I found that a bit with Brand New, when they went from their sort of emo-y side to Devil and God and Daisy. I think they're two masterpiece albums. I think they're absolutely phenomenal albums, and they're completely off from what they've done before.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that...
Both of those... Sorry.
It's okay. I was only going to say that's the thing that me as an enjoyer of music and enjoyer of art, that's what makes my ears stick up and pay attention, is when somebody does something and strikes out. And I think it's because there's just a degree of risk there that doesn't always pay off. I know it didn't for Finch, but you've got, I think risk is an important part of art. I don't know how you feel about this, but sometimes like what gets in the way of good art is like comfort and safety and wanting something easy. And for musicians, it's like we speak about like selling out and things like that for the sake of money, but I think risk is really quite important.
I was going to say to you, do you think the risk is still there, like within the music and short, like the film industry? To me, it all seems to be safe bets. People have got, musicians have already sort of fan bases built up, and our record companies taking those risks.
Not at all. I'm shaking my head, by the way, for those listening to the podcast. I'm shaking my head side to side. No,
It was a dramatic
not.
shake.
It was. No, absolutely not. I mean, I hadn't pre-considered this before we got here, but no, I don't think. I think it's just in the music industry and maybe in others, but I'm more familiar with the music industry, so that's the one I'll speak about. I just think there's a bad series of market incentives that discourages risk taking and bravery and encourages cowardice, really. And so it encourages bad music. It encourages nothing good, really. So like I've been a musician since I was 15. I'm 35 now, so it's like 20 years of being a musician, and I have given it a go, and I've tried to be successful with it. But at some point, you kind of realize that actually the odds are slim, which kind of makes it that it's a bit of a turn off. But also, I just feel like that was when I was working full time as a musician, which was producing records and running a little music studio, like rehearsal rooms and stuff, sound engineering and whatnot. When I was doing that, I was doing it because of a bad series of market incentives. I was doing it because I needed the money and I needed to eat. And so I did it for that. And I just wanted to work in music. And it was a great experience. But I don't think anything there encouraged me to do and produce good work. That's not to say that I didn't produce good work and I couldn't. I just think there's a lot of things I kind of set up to make it harder to do.
As well, do you think that, and I'm going back to it, and it's probably the same with the sort of Instagram thing, with the likes of streaming services and downloading, has music lost its value in inverted commas? You think about before you'd spend, you have to go to a record shop and buy an album, £12, whatever, £13, £14. Now you've got unlimited albums right at your fingertips. £10 a month, you can listen to what you want. So does that cheapen it? The amount of albums I bought, or the song on the album, I hate this song. Then it becomes my favourite song, but through constant listening and understanding the song more, it's music become more disposable, I suppose, is what I'm.
I don't know. I don't know really if the music has become more disposable. I think it's just that we've changed. I think the music is there's probably more of it than there ever was, which means there's probably more good music than there ever was. And there's probably more bad music too. But I mean, that seems to me to be a good thing.
From us as consumers, as it become more disposable, not the fact that you can't listen to any album. You name an album, I'll find it on my phone. We can be listening to it like that.
I think people don't know how to express a value judgment for art, and I include myself in this as well. I guess I haven't always known, like, what do I do when I love something? What do I do if I love this record, or what do I do if I love this book? Do I buy it secondhand and used and like chuck it in a corner and forget about it, or do I frame it? So I've tried to buy records now and frame them on the wall. I'm very selective about what I buy. When I was younger, I used to just buy anything, and I was not very selective at all. I suppose I was trying to form my tastes a little bit more, but very selective now, and I'll buy art that I want to reward just for the art itself. So if I suppose my attitude's changed really since I started this podcast as well, which is that I think there's like a cultural setup that doesn't value art and doesn't respect art. I think people just take it for granted and expect it to be free. Or I think okay, so this is a deeper problem, I think. And so I'm reading a book at the moment. It's called The Master and His Emissary. I actually held this up to you before the podcast begun. I've been reading this book for a couple of years, probably a couple of years now. It's taken ages. It's quite a dense book. It's quite hard to read. And I keep getting distracted and going off to read something else. Being at university is one reason I did that. But the book is about a hypothesis that the two hemispheres in the brain have very different ways of looking at the world. He kind of I always forget the word. He makes them human. Anthropomorphizes like the two hemispheres. That's the one. So he says the left hemisphere looks at things in terms of their utility, like how useful they are, how much money they can make, being an example of that. But it's very it's very myopic. It's very narrow focused. So it's looking at dismantling complex things into tiny parts and considering them as just small parts, separate from the whole, like nothing to do with the whole. So the right hemisphere being quite different to that is one that's actually just with the left hemisphere. Sorry, most people commonly associate it with language and words. They can both do it, and there's some crossover and things like that. But most kind of colloquially, people think of the left hemisphere as the one that does the words, and that's mostly right. The right hemisphere is the one that does the bigger picture of things. So it's kind of less laser focused, and it's more about the whole itself rather than the parts. And these two hemispheres, the way their expectations when they look at the world are very different. So the left hemisphere, you could say, is kind of looking more at intellect, and the right hemisphere is more to do with intuition, if that makes any sense. And so there's some parallel there between like science and art. In earlier podcasts, I spoke about like characters in Star Trek, like Spock and Kirk. The emotions and logic, like these sorts of. There is this kind of like the two parallel things that have got to run in harmony together. Anyway, there's the context. The hypothesis that is putting forward in the book is that our culture, unlike many others, has been tilting towards a prioritization of the left hemisphere to our own detriment, and it's caused us to behave in ways that we never have in the past. It's been doing this for the last 100 years, kind of taken this tilt, and what it means is that whereas before we would have taken art as a truth in its own right, so it's a metaphorical truth. So let's bring this back into your photography piece that we started speaking about depression. It's like there's a metaphorical truth in that, where it's, if you just take it on its own merits, there's some kind of truth in it. You just see it and you can kind of go, that just resonates with me. I just kind of get that. The other side of this kind of analytical truth in the left hemisphere, this literal truth, is like, what does it literally mean? Let's break it into its parts. This is kind of what we were speaking about at the start, really, is like breaking it into its pieces and talking about like, what was that person thinking when he did it? What does it mean? And that's something he argues, the author argues, that we never used to do. We used to just be able to take art for art's sake and just intuit the meaning and do most of the work on our intuitions. And now it's almost used as a pejorative, like art. It's almost seen as like, or metaphor is seen as less than logic.
Yeah, and I think I keep going back to it, but I think the fact that everything now is on a digital. Nothing's real anymore. There's nothing physical about it anymore. I mean, you're looking at like paintings and sculpture and things like that. But even that, what percentage of the world has seen the Mona Lisa, for instance, or knows of the Mona Lisa, but then compare it to the percentage that's actually seen in the flesh. Me being one of those that hasn't seen it in the flesh. Do you know what I mean? So everything becomes digital. You can go on computer and say, right, I want to look at the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Seconds, it's there. Rather than before, back in the day, you would have to go on a pilgrimage to Rome to visit the Sistine Chapel to see it.
Yes, it has more meaning to a person because there's some kind of pilgrimage to it. I guess like we're coming at the same thing from different sides there. You from the top down or from the bottom up. I'm really just saying I agree. Like I just think there is something about our psychology. Maybe it's our neurology as well. I don't really know, but there is something about our psychology that it's like we expect things to have some kind of monetary value, and so we expect art to just be a symbol for like it's worth something in monetary terms. This record is worth this many pounds, and that's how we judge the value of it. And I think that's the thing for me that's kind of pushing us in. Maybe it's not pushing us in the wrong way, but that's the thing I'm fixated on at the moment, I guess.
Yeah, I kind of, again, I'm with you. I'm coming at it from a different angle to you, definitely. But I don't know. I think to me, from my own experiences, it seems like it becomes worth less because it is digital, because it's not real. If that makes sense, as in compared to physical. I mean, not real, but
I guess
physical.
all I'm saying is I'm agreeing, but things have become digital because of this way that our minds have shifted and our behavior has shifted over the last couple of 100 years. But I guess to address the digital thing, I think when things are easy, they just don't seem worth anything anymore.
Yeah, I mean, you look at new phones and the cameras that there are on those. Going back to cameras again, you know, the effects that they can do. You could spend months trying to master, months, years, whatever, trying to master doing that. On an SLR camera, that you can just tap a button and it does it for you. That you've got no idea what it's doing. It's just running an algorithm. You just see the final result of it, not knowing the workings, the science, etc. behind that. If you know what I mean.
Yeah. Do you think it causes people to take things for granted? Maybe.
Yeah, I do think so, to a degree. I mean, I could be very wrong. I think a lot of people argue. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that there are so many photographs about, because I think it's we're the most documented generation in history, aren't we? But at the same time, like I say, it's that disposable thing. When before camera phones, you would go out with a camera with a film in, or one of those disposable cameras, whatever you want, and you'd have X amount of shots you could take that night. Now you can just keep snapping away all night long.
Yeah. I just wonder if it does just almost seem as if you would used to have to spend time. You'd have to spend your own time kind of developing a skill. Like in your case, you've gone from somebody who's maybe got a feeling that the camera is the right fit and the right instrument for you, but then you've spent years, genuinely years, developing that to some point where it's a profession and you're capable and you're more skilled than you were, and it's as if, I mean, I've heard this argument made before about things, about how we're making ourselves more stupid because there was a time when people could internalize a map, say, and their sense of direction would work better because they knew how to read a map, or their ability to do calculations, complex calculations, was better because they could use an abacus. And since we got rid of those tools, because we have calculators, for example, and GPS, we actually don't know anything. We don't know how to get places. We don't know how to do maths, and we don't need to. I'm like, is that a good thing?
Not criticizing my friends, but I'll get in the car with them and they'll be driving places they know where they're going, but they will still put their sat nav on and rely on their sat nav to take them where they're going, which I find a bizarre concept. I mean, it works for them. It's just, I find it strange, that reliance on that bit of software rather than relying on your own intuition.
Yeah, well, I guess that's the thing with something like Instagram. So we mentioned that earlier on, when people have it so easy on a phone because you've got all of the presets there. Or is it making it too easy for people that it makes it more likely that they just will not really care enough about the end product or what they're doing?
To a degree, I would say, yeah, I think so. I do think so. I mean, there are some very, very skilled iPhoneographers out there.
Is that what they're called?
Well, I'm going back a few years. A photographer I like, Lyle Cardi, his wife is an iPhoneographer, and she does some stunning stuff on the iPhone. I've never been able to get on with iPhone cameras. My photos always look rubbish on them. Because I've just spent my time with my SLR, slim with that. But there are some very talented people out there using iPhones for phones for artistic photographs, natural proper photos. But then you get a lot of people that it's just there to capture that moment, and are people diluting photographs? And it's like, did you spend any time having that meal that evening out? Do you remember that other than through the photographs? People at gigs filming, watching a live band through a screen. It's just, I find it a very, very strange concept.
In a negative way?
For me, negative. Obviously not for them. It gives them that reminder, and that, I'll not criticize anybody for doing it. But I just find it, again, bizarre. You paid money to see this band, and you're watching it through a screen to record a 30-minute clip that invariably sounds awful, and you won't watch again. And you've watched this band through a screen rather than watching them there in front of you.
Yeah. So okay. So what's the? Because I'm sure there is a difference. So, but what is it for you when you're kind of going out of your way, or if you're doing band photography? Like, what's the difference there between somebody like yourself going to a gig and taking photographs, or going out into the natural world and taking a landscape photo, and somebody who just happens to be in that place and takes a photograph? Like, do you think there's a difference in experience there?
Oh,
Don't
not
feel
necessarily.
like don't feel like you have to be nice.
No, I think some people, it's just a case of, again, one of my very good friends, we'll go places, and it'll be he's very clinical, and he's like, I want to see this, I want to see that, and it's like, right, seen it now, on to the next, seen it now, on to the next. Whereas I like to take time to take it in. And he gets bored. Like, we're on about going on holiday to Iceland together, and he said, "I do." Well, yeah, we had a discussion, and then he's like, "But you'll be taking photographs." It's like, well, if I'm going there again, yeah, I will be. And so we decided we're probably not the best travel partners, because we want different things out of it. And I think I'm showing my age, I'm sure, but I think there's a lot more instant gratification to stuff now. With throughout, it's middle of the night, you want a new shirt, you buy a new shirt online, it's with you within 24 hours. There's no waiting. You want. I know I'm going back to where we've already been, so I do apologise for that. But I think as a culture now, it's very much about instant gratification. Done that, on to the next.
Yeah, I think that's totally clear. By the way, I mean, these are the things that I'm kind of saying. This is very left hemisphere. Instant gratification. Move on to the next thing. That's very left hemisphere. So that's kind of what I'm getting at there. But you think things like social media, the way the notifications work on there, Netflix, are you still watching? YouTube, just the way the algorithm works to encourage you to watch the next video. All of these sorts of things are kind of set up for instant gratification. And maybe we spoke about Amazon and next day delivery as well. But yeah, I agree. I mean, earlier I described something as a series of bad market incentives, and I think that's one of them that we've tricked ourselves into believing it actually has a positive effect. So, if I actually don't do it anymore. If I'm at a gig, I don't take photographs on my phone. I don't film it at all. I just want to
exactly.
I'm exactly
the same.
I really do, but I can see, and I have experienced the allure, and it's the false allure of being able to capture the moment on your phone, because you think, I mean, and I'm only really speaking as myself here, but you believe that getting your phone out and trying to capture the moment on your phone is actually going to improve and augment the experience in some way. And I think you just do it because you don't really give it any second thought. It just feels like that's the right thing to do. And I just don't think I think if you just investigate it for yourself and just ask yourself, like, has my picking up my phone to watch this artist who I've paid money to see through, is that making my experience better in any way? And I just don't see how the answer can be.
I don't. Yes. I mean, is it a generational thing? When we obviously a couple of years, but we're pretty much the same age. Initially, when I was like 13, 14, when I started going, didn't have a mobile phone, let alone one with a camera. So it was never an option. So it was, it's never been part of my original gig going experience, and it's not seeped into my gig going experience since then. Whereas you've got people that, have had phones since they were kids, with good cameras on them. Is it an age thing? We're just getting old, and it's a completely different culture to what we were part of.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it's just what happens if you give a monkey a gun, They don't know what to do with it. They end up shooting someone. And I think it's the same sort of thing for us with smartphones and social media. We've kind of just done this weird social experiment where we've rolled out these things and just started using them blindly as if, and taking them for granted, really, that they are good things and they are improving our experience. I remember social media being marketed as great for communication. It's awful for
And
communication.
it's that thing of, look what I'm doing now. Look what I'm doing now. I'm at a gig. I'm at a club. I'm at a, I'm having this meal. I'm sat on this beach, and I think it's this need to kind of show off. And I suppose you can culture, which is a completely different conversation in its own right. But is it sort of emulation of lifestyle that people see celebrities and role models, etc., living, and they want to kind of be part of that. I don't know if I've gone off at a bit of a tangent with that one.
No, I think it ties in fairly. I mean, I just think we're human and we're wired a certain way to behave and do certain things and to seek out certain things. And technology, things like smartphones, social media, all these things, I think they're a result of a lot of prior changes, which is what I was referencing to with this hypothesis, sorry, in the book. But I just think the way we can't help ourselves but want instant gratification. We want things to be easy. It's easier. Of course we prefer that. But I don't think that automatically follows that it's good.
No, I mean, it's at your fingertips all the time, isn't it? How many times have you sat down to watch TV and there's something you really want to watch and you still end up messing about on your phone?
And it's that same thing. It's like, what? It's too tempting. I mean, why wouldn't you? You've got the entire bulk of human knowledge just kind of in a little square next to you. How could you resist the temptation to look at anything you could possibly imagine whenever you want to? How can you resist that? And the answer is you can't. It's extremely difficult. We have to literally put our phones at the other side of the room just to switch off from them. I guess like the interesting thing for me there that hadn't really occurred to me before is that we're built to want certain things, and I just think some of the technology and some of these kind of recent innovations in the last 10 years, all the things we've just mentioned, and things that I described as like bad market incentives, I guess, they're almost warping our behavior in a way that means we devalue things like art.
I couldn't agree with you anymore with that one. It is, I think, our lifestyles have been sort of changed by the technology and it's moving so fast as well. It doesn't seem to slow down. It seems to be moving faster than I can ever think I've moved within my lifetime.
Yeah, it's just like this weird exponential growth. It's like a tumor. I don't really think of it as a problem. Like, I think for all of we're kind of taking this negative angle, and I don't think you or I think overall
not in the slightest.
Pack it in. I think we both agree. I think everything actually is. We've got the tools there that could make things better. I just don't know if we're quite using them properly. Just as yet, we haven't quite developed our skills to use the tools for our own interest. I mean, how would you solve this sort of problem of disposability with art?
I don't know if there is any way to solve it, to be honest with you. I don't mean just because everybody has access, and it's not a bad thing in many respects, but everybody has some description and have it seen by somebody else on the other side of the world.
Well, I guess maybe speak for. I could rephrase the question and ask you, like, what do you do to appreciate art? Like, what are you doing differently to everybody else that you think everybody else should be doing?
Right. I mean, I love my landscape. Like I say, I like looking at landscapes, and I think the fact that I can, having gone out and spent hours stood waiting for the sun to move to the right spot or whatever image around, it's been like click right next. Last February I was stood in a freezing cold river, waiting for some clouds to move over a mountain in waders, and it was cold, but it was worth it in the long run to get that image. And I found it cleansing. I feel at my freest and my happiest when I'm out doing stuff like that. But for me, I think it's the appreciation of what goes into making that image. But like I said, when you can just stand there and your phone can do it for you, and you can press a button and it puts an entirely new sky in colour grades photograph as though the sun was over here and stuff. Like I say, it just makes it disposable, because what's the difference? At the end of the day, the photograph, if we've taken the mumbling here, but if me and I've gone out with my camera and somebody's gone out with their phone and they've taken those photographs and you put them up as a viewer, are you going to be able to tell the difference? Does that make sense?
Let's see. I'll repeat it back and we'll see. Do you mean to say that if two photographers were to take an identical photo in terms of its framing and layout, but on different devices, would you be able to tell the difference? Or do you mean something else?
I suppose so, to a degree, but not knowing, like for me, knowing what goes into making an image. Like I said, stood in a river for an hour or so. Compare it's do the small details matter as much to those people that are just coming in with the clicking and going?
So I think you're saying something maybe about like the process or the journey. Then
I suppose so. But having walked that journey, then having more appreciation when you see other people and know what they've put into theirs. If you know what I mean.
Okay, I do. So I think I do. This sounds to me more like an argument for education and arts education in that case. Like you've got to appreciate art, you need to have experience creating it for yourself.
Not necessarily. I mean, education, I can never argue. I don't think such a thing is too much education. It's always good to be learning. It's always good to be learning something new, be it, simple facts, whatever. I think you should be learning every day, and there's no such thing as too much education as far as I'm concerned. I've gone off on a tangent there.
But I suppose I'm just trying to kind of narrow it down so I'm clear on what your view is, your kind of remedy for this disposability.
Like I said, I genuinely don't think that disposability, I don't think there's a cure to it because of it would be a cultural shift, I think.
I'm maybe more of an optimist then in that case. I think there's something that can be done. I mean, I guess I'm gone.
No, it's because I'm just grumpy, so.
I mean, I'm only really starting with myself and presuming that what I'm doing is not an isolated case. And I feel like I appreciate art more now than I ever have done. And because I create it more often and I know how much work goes into it. And I've tried to sell my own. So I think I now, possibly has something to do with the fact that we're living through a pandemic as well, and you see kind of high street staples like shops and things like that closing down, and it kind of makes you feel like actually I can't rely on things just being there because they're there. Is at some point you've got to make an act, you've got to make got to commit to things that you enjoy. And if you love something, you should reward it and you should kind of send a signal out to the world, if you like, that says, I want more of that. And I think the only language that we currently understand is money. So pay for your art. If you love a band, buy their record every time.
Oh, I stand by it. I've never been a downloader. I do have a streaming account, but I still buy records. I buy a few a week. I love buying bit record CDs. I like the experience. I like the physical product. I like the artwork. I like the fact that track listings, those songs have been put in an order for specific reasons. And like I say, that thing of I'm not keen on that song, and then a few months later it's your favourite song on the album. So I'm saying with books, I don't like downloading. I'm not. I never have been. I've always been about buying and paying for what I've got.
Yeah, that you've enjoyed, that even you love, really. I mean, I think maybe that's part of it, is that not everybody does do that, and they can love something. Say it's a TV program. Game of Thrones springs to mind as one of the most downloaded TV series so far ever. But people love it. How do you reward that? How do you say we want more of that? Like, people complain about the ending for Game of Thrones, for example, but it's like, well, how do you say to Game of Thrones, we want you to carry on making the best possible thing you can, if most of the people, and myself included, unfortunately, download it and don't pay for it? Like, what message is that sending to to the world, and I think it sends the wrong one.
Oh yeah, I'd agree on that one. I've agreed with you a lot on that. We're very much on the same page with this. But yeah, how can you reward that? I mean, like I said, I think that streaming thing, because it stopped that download, illegally downloading people. Okay, bands are getting paid tiny bit per play, but at least there's that money coming in. It's not illegal like it was, and bands are making some money from it. And obviously, like,
yeah, it's better than nothing.
Yeah, and record shops seem to be, they're not as there aren't as many as there were, because, but then there's then an upsurge in vinyl sales as well, which I think's fantastic.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, I mean, you're right. I think this is a bigger problem than we'll solve in this podcast. I think.
So we're two mighty minds, but I think it's even out of our out of our field of expertise.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the long-term answer is. I do think the short-term answer is simple, and it's pay for your art. I think that part for the individual, pretty easy, but has a measurable effect for the positive. So let's leave it there. I think we've come to kind of a natural end there. This was great. It was really a good chance.
Thank you very much for having me. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah. Likewise, it's the first, like I say earlier on in the podcast, this is the first photographer I've been able to. It's the first time I've been able to speak to a photographer and kind of get inside your experience when you're doing that. And I don't have that same experience. It's fascinating to hear. Where can people find your work online, particularly the images that we've spoken about, if necessary?
Mainly, it would have been the Kaboom Images on Instagram, and got a Kaboom Images Facebook page as well, both under Kaboom Images. That's probably the best place to find them on there.
Yeah, I'll link that in all the show. I'll try and dig up the photos or something like that if I can find a way to link those. I'll do that too. But this has been great. So have a good night, and we'll speak later.
Thank you. You too. Fantastic speaking to you. See you later.